Good morning. Welcome to Coffee with Caregivers, brought to you by the National Foster Parent Association. Well, it's another beautiful day here in Central Texas. It's going to be another hot one. And we're watching the Gulf of Mexico because there's a potential storm coming in that could be a hurricane by Tuesday. I know that we have friends in Florida. They're watching another one that's coming in off of the ocean there. Hopefully everyone will be safe if they come to fruition and make landfall. So let's keep an eye out on that and be praying for those who may be affected. Well, we've got another good show for you today. It's just so exciting for me to be able to do this and to introduce you to people that I think are life changers for many people and have been for many people, and will continue to do that. And people who are really experts in the topics that they enjoy speaking about. So today there's a few things, just a couple of little quick things that I wanted to mention. And one is I found a quote. I love those. I love quotes. This one was not attributed to anybody. I never could find out. If you hear it and then please let me know who said this. But I think it's relevant to today's topic because our topic today is about post-traumatic stress disorder. And the quote is, "Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives." That's pretty darn profound and pretty darn true. And a valuable lesson that we all probably need to keep reminding ourselves about when we start having a pity party or feeling bad about things. So my cup today, I think, is very appropriate for anybody with a family, especially people with kids at home. And it says that I'm the chaos coordinator. I'm sure that each of you feel like that pretty much every day now, as the chaos coordinator of your home, your family, your household, your work environment, wherever that might be. Just the chaos in the world right now is frightening, stressful, and we feel kind of it's out of sorts most of the time. From what I'm hearing from everybody, I know that rings true for me more often than ever in my life before. Chaos coordinator, I'll take it. If I could get a cup like that to each of you, I would. Okay, on to our guest. So it's just a thrill to welcome Jeff Luce to our show. Hi, Jeff. Jeff and I haven't seen each other in probably 2 years.
Yeah.
And so it's just awesome to see his face pop up a while ago. And I must say that the 2 years did you well. I love your smile. I love your dimples. You're a happy person and you exude that. And you always have each time that I've been able to be around you and experience how you attend to life. So, Jeff, what I'm going to ask of you first is to introduce yourself and tell our audience, what are the important things that you want them to know about you? And you can choose what those are. And then if you tell us about your cup, that would be great.
All right. And then it'll all tie in, Irene, and it's wonderful to see you as well. Thank you. I'm Jeff Luce. I'm a clinician by trade. So I'm a master's level clinician, therapist, counselor. They call us many different things. I spent many years working in direct care in group homes in the Atlanta area, actually. And I would honestly say those were some of my most impactful professional experiences, clinical experiences. I got to work with just some wonderful, wonderful kids and staff at some of these group homes. And It just was a profoundly impactful time in my life. I went on to do leadership work in the outpatient behavioral health space, kind of connected to that. And so had kind of multiple roles in an outpatient behavioral health provider, clinical director and things like that. I, from there, went into some consulting work around mental health, behavioral health. That's where I, ran into Irene, and that's where we connected and got to know one another. Since then, I had been working in managed care or health insurance, right? So kind of maintaining a clinical angle, but within a managed care environment. And most recently here, I'm at Optum Behavioral Health, which is a subsidiary of United Health. And I'm the foster care lead at Optum, and love what I do and love the folks I work with, and basically get to work on and think about how we can better serve and impact the lives of kids in foster care who are in, our health plans, and what that looks like going forward. So that's kind of me professionally. I live in Atlanta, North Atlanta. I'm just kind of a, middle-aged dad is kind of my mode. My mug, I'll show you my mug. Let's see if you can see it. It says El Jefe. So it's kind of like a play on words. It means the chief. My kids got it for me. I have 4 kids of my own. My kids got it for me for Father's Day. And I love the kind of pun / whatever. So and I like the size, it's like I'm a connoisseur of mugs as well. So I like the size, the feel. I love all of it. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, Irene.
Well, like I say, it was wonderful meeting you. I guess the first time was probably in Atlanta.
Yep.
And we were reminiscing a little while ago about how you picked me up at the Atlanta airport in your pickup truck.
Yep.
We went downtown and went to some important meetings, and had some few things to say at those meetings. And then you took me back to the airport, but I got to spend quality time with you, just kind of one-on-one in that pickup truck. And I felt right at home there because we have a pickup truck too.
Yeah.
And but it was a really good time. And I really was impressed with you. And so you've always kind of been on my mind. And when I found out the position that you're in now, I'm like, okay, we got to jump on that, because I know you could be a really valuable person to helping us make sure that the families we serve, who serve kids through the foster care systems, really are well informed, have good information, know where to get more information if they need it, and that sort of thing. So I know you're going to do another Coffee with Caregivers for us in a few weeks on a different topic, because there were 2 that I particularly was interested in for you. And the one you're going to talk about today is PTSD. So I'm just going to kind of throw it open to you, Jeff, and let you use your knowledge and your expertise and how to best inform the families in the 30 minutes we have or so. And let them, know that there's hope at the end of the tunnel and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Irene, I'm happy to just kind of start throwing out some information and facts that I've got. And obviously if I, anytime you want to jump in or ask me to go a little deeper, I'm happy to do that. But yeah, this is a critical topic when you think about kids who are in foster care, right? This is an impactful thing. So I'm going to start with a little bit of statistics, okay?
Okay.
So just
Sure.
in our kind of general population, overall population, right? The kind of prevalence or how frequent people experience in the general population PTSD is about 7 to 8%. So about 7 to 8% of people at any given time are kind of suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the studies around foster care alumni indicate that foster care alumni, at any given time are around 25% experiencing PTSD and PTSD symptoms, right? PTSD is interesting because it's post-traumatic stress, right? Traumatic. And typically we think of that being like a point in time. Think of like a severe car accident, a violent encounter, an event that would be traumatic, right? One of the interesting things about PTSD is not every person who experiences that situation, that thing, that event is going to develop PTSD. It's interesting. It's not a direct correlation, right? Some of the studies that I was reviewing prior to this to make sure that my stats were recent, Irene, up to date, it is interesting the gender breakdown here. For kids who experience trauma, girls are about 3 to 15% of those girls will develop PTSD, while for boys, it's about 1 to 6% will develop PTSD based on that
Wow.
trauma. It's kind of interesting.
That's a stat I hadn't heard before. That's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and I think I could certainly hypothesize as to why that may be. I won't like go way down the rabbit hole. I think I think the way to probably describe that would be boys express the symptomology a little bit different. Maybe, think aggression, think, some of the conduct disorders. I think back to the kids I worked with in group homes, and certainly had, female, young women that were expressing conduct disorders, but that was more of like the boy wing or the boy unit, right? Or the boy area of the group homes I was working in. So I think that's one of the ways, kind of underneath why the PTSD gets developed, though, are a couple of factors. A, the severity of the trauma. So how intense was the trauma that we're talking about? B, what was the parent or caregiver, what was the involvement and what was their reaction to the trauma, right? How did they help that kid like work through, process, deal with, the event, the occurrence, or whatever? And then how close or how far away the kid is from the traumatic event, from that trauma. And so, I mean, obviously, when you think about a lot of the kids that I think about on a day-to-day basis, you and, the folks listening or caring for and working with, a lot of these kids have experienced very severe trauma, right? And have had experiences maybe where their caregivers at the time or their parents, maybe they were actively involved in the trauma and certainly may not have helped them process, the traumatic experiences, right? And then oftentimes they're very close to the trauma. So that's a few of the kind of key stats I think I wanted to start with here. One of the other interesting recent statistics. We all think of PTSD, right? And the first thing that pops into most people's minds is military experience, right? Like war experiences, and he came back from Iraq or whatever with PTSD. Harvard did a study and did a comparative analysis that showed that kids in foster care are twice as likely to have PTSD as compared to Iraq war veterans returning home. So, it's a 2x. That's twice. That's significant, right? So,
do you think that disruptions in foster family is something that significantly adds to that whatever the past trauma or traumas were?
Yes.
That maybe exacerbates how the child's responding to that. So how big of a burden do all of us who make decisions about if a child stays or goes, how much of a role do we play in making it worse? Am I making sense in how I ask that question?
Oh, it's a critical question, Irene. And I think a couple things. So anecdotally, and you're probably thinking anecdotally as well, some of the kids you've seen or heard about or know, right? And I'm thinking of some of those kids who I worked with that I was trying to help figure out how we can just hold on to this placement. And then when it didn't happen, you saw the traumatic kind of occurrence and the kind of exacerbation or the, increase of the PTSD. The way I kind of define trauma from a clinical perspective, very boiled down, right? Not like a very clinical high level definition. I think of trauma as being when a situation presents itself, like an occurrence happens. So again, car accident, violence, things like that, but also a disrupted placement, right? You're getting pulled out of one setting and into another. That's an event, right? And when the event exceeds like the coping resources that kid has, within themselves at that moment. Maybe they're very depleted and very worn down and very challenged, right? An event that may not have been traumatic a year ago, maybe a traumatic event this year because they've been worn down and challenged and so forth. And so I think that the disruptive placement issue is a real challenge. I did have and pull some statistics here. And these are statistics you probably know and have heard, but 90% of kids in the foster care system with 5 or more moves end up in the juvenile justice system in some way. So there's all kinds of outflows and outcomes that are connected to these types of things. But absolutely the issue of placement stability it's honestly one that, again, I'm in a seat in health insurance in that space, and I think about this issue, which is not exactly connected to my work, but I am always thinking about like, what can we do to impact placement stability? How can we make it easier for a family to maintain a kid in their home, right? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, it's a critical thing. And one of the other kind of pieces I wanted to get into, Irene, is, again, we've heard of PTSD. There's another kind of angle to PTSD, which is called complex PTSD. And I'm not trying to get like super technical or super clinical, because it gets a little verbose or whatever. But I think it's important to kind of understand, like, PTSD is typically connected to a single event, right? Like I mentioned, like a big, traumatic event. Whereas complex PTSD is more connected with like a longer duration kind of situation. And so, I think back to challenging things I went through as a kid. There were more events, and maybe I didn't develop PTSD personally, but I could have based on some of these events. Complex PTSD, again, is like a duration of time. And, for a lot of the kids that we know and that we, work to serve, oftentimes it is their childhood in general was just a kind of complex traumatic event, by and large. And there's kind of, there's obvious outcomes and things that flow out of a life, of years that look like that. So yeah, I don't know. Does that help? And I'm wondering kind of where you would want to kind of jump into next. I've got a few other ideas, but anything I could help clarify?
Yeah, I think it's important that all of us that work within the arena of foster care and certainly our play advocate roles as well in looking at policy and even new legislation or revising maybe what's not working, have to focus on a big piece on the stability of when we're going to separate a child from their parents and join them to another family that they don't know. That needs to be extremely well thought out, and as just as absolutely appropriate as possible. And that every opportunity for support for that child and that family needs to be accomplished. I mean, I think back of how we couldn't get any help, and you were afraid for the safety of your own children because of the behaviors that were being exhibited by a new child joining your family, and rarely did we get any good information, and so it was all usually a surprise, right? But there was nobody on call that would call back right away, and if they did, they didn't have a clue. I mean, they weren't a clinician, they hadn't been a parent yet. was all theory, there was nobody we could talk to. So we wound up having to go to other foster parents who were more tenured than we were and had gotten a little wiser with each child that joined their family to get the help that we needed. And then with one of the boys we adopted, I mean, how we managed to get him grown, I'm not sure, but he's a fantastic man now. Great dad and husband. And
Wow.
but there were years there when we didn't know if we were going to be able to keep him in the family. And I know that I had to fight so hard for services, and everybody wanted to take him out of our family and put him in a residential treatment center, move him, somewhere. And I just wasn't going to let that young man feel like we were giving up on him. And so we fought tooth and nail to get day treatment instead of residential treatment. And yeah, it was a pain in the butt for us because the program was 40 miles away. I had to take him every morning and go get him every evening. But by golly, that boy was going to sit at my dinner table with our family and be a part of the family and know that no matter how bad it got with him and how hard he had to fight to get through it, we were there with him every minute of the way. And it worked. I mean, it worked. Yeah. It didn't work quick. It took time. He kind of found himself in his early 30s, really. And like I say, now he's just, oh my God, he's got this incredible family. And he's such a good father. And
but
he's another miracle. But if we would have let him go, if we'd have done what all the professionals said to do, just put him somewhere. Give yourselves a break. Put him somewhere. Yeah. I needed to have that relationship with him, and I knew it would be hard, like 1 hour a week with the therapist and him at the center or something. I want us to all struggle and fight for our kids, whether they're in foster care or adoption with us, to know that we have to advocate. And when it comes to when we're not getting enough assistance through the system to keep that child within our family, that we've got to stand up and fight for that. And sometimes it doesn't make us real popular, but by golly, that child's worth it. Every single one of these kids is worth it. And I'm just heartbroken. And I know there are times when situations say we can't do this anymore, and the child really does need a different type of environment. But when I see judges get a wild hair and move kids and nobody knows why, when I see children moved and everybody's in agreement that it really needs to happen, but they're whisked away in 30 minutes or taken from the school or whatever because it's convenient to the person who's going to be delivering them to the next place, drives me crazy when I hear those things, because in my experience, it just makes everything worse for that kid. And how far we've gotten with them in this process of understanding as well as it can the past and figuring out how to make the future, right? It's gone.
Right.
It's been wiped away by inconsideration, disrespect, and whatever all we want to call it to these kids. It's like they're commodities. And, I'm on my high horse now, I know, but how do we as a system, and I know you're part of that system now, how do we affect that? And I think one of the ways is by having this kind of discussion, that y'all are really looking to work with the foster families of the kids that you cover in your managed care for Medicaid for kids in foster care, and to help those parents be the best they can be to that child and get the services that are identified to that child. That's your responsibility, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And we have to keep doing that. So it's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful you're on, because we've got to spread that word and to help people really understand that every one of these moves that's not well planned and well thought out is really detrimental to kids. And it's not just saying it, it is.
Well, and I think it's such I love your passion, first of all, Irene. It's like one of the things I love most in talking with you. It's so good. Um, I think one of the ways I look at it is when I'm working kind of clinically with people, right? And it's like anxiety, it's depression, whatever you're bringing to me. One of the first questions I want to ask is like, what is your depression telling you or trying to tell you? What is your anxiety telling you or trying to tell you? And in the case of this PTSD issue and the behaviors that flow out of PTSD, things like irritability, that reactivity, like this is a symptom of PTSD, right? Angry outbursts, punching walls, like these are all symptoms of PTSD. Right. And I wonder what it would look like to maybe even like reframe PTSD, right? There's a reason it exists. It exists because we have to survive as human beings. And PTSD kicks into gear because your survival was put at risk with an accident, with a violent encounter, with abuse. Like these things present an existential like a problem to your like sustained life. PTSD kicks in, because of those things, and you have PTSD, and it's really, again, I wonder what it would look like to begin to think of PTSD as like a protective mechanism that these kids have developed, in order to just maintain their survival. And so when you talk about this young man that you took in, what the kind of lights that are going off for me is like he was maintaining survival, and the way
Right.
he kind of the outcome and outflow of a traumatic childhood, when you develop PTSD or complex PTSD, you're going to maintain survival. So the first thing I always tell kids that are suffering in this way is like, dude, you're a survivor. Like you are a survivor. Like I want you present at the zombie apocalypse because I know you're gonna make it, right? Like that's what I would always say.
Right.
But so to first of all kind of reframe it in that way, I think is helpful, and to help like especially parents or foster parents understand like this is a survival mechanism that is kicked into gear. Our job isn't to like, hammer down behaviors like we're playing whack-a-mole. Rather, it's to understand how we got here, and then to like give some new tools, right? Like a kid who's like acting out again with the PTSD symptomology, right? They're hyper vigilant. They're always on edge. They're,
right.
Irritable, angry outbursts. They have reckless and destructive behavior. I assure you that kid is not living their best life. Like they're not having fun. Like, right? This is not what they want to be, like in their deepest parts want to be doing. So to understand that, and then to help to develop some mechanisms that get it. And you reference like getting good help and the right help. It's absolutely right. Oftentimes it is a clinical person, behavioral health clinician. One of the challenges that we're constantly meeting about kind of within the insurance space is like, how do we better equip parents and foster parents and everyone to know like which of these kind of 100 clinicians that you pull up when you Google it or when you go to the network list, which of these will be specifically kind of identified as someone who works well with the challenges that you've got going on, right? And so that's a kind of perpetual and constant thing. So yeah, it's again, PTSD flows out of a survival thing. It's very connected in with that, fight, flight, freeze, survival mechanism. And to understand that, and to understand like, okay, I see a kid who's off the chain and he's just kind of just losing it. We got to address the behavior, sure, but we also need to understand like this is coming from somewhere. So yeah.
Well, that's why I started out today with the quote about healing doesn't mean the damage never existed.
That's exactly right.
The damage no longer controls our lives. And I've watched that play out, and
absolutely.
and my kids, actually both of my adopted sons. And it's all there.
Yep. That's right.
But they've learned how to manage that and put it where it belongs in their perspective. And as I watch them raise their children, I'm amazed at the strengths they are giving to their kids because of the struggles they had. They have a better understanding of life,
right,
probably than I do, because I didn't have so many of those struggles, but they've had to figure it out. They've had to figure out how to be a normal guy, a loving dad, a good husband, a wage earner, right? To meet the needs of their commitments. They've had to figure it out. And it didn't come easy.
Right.
Because it didn't come naturally. They were too hyped up. They were too afraid. They were too vigilant to be a part of that. And they had to figure out how to make that happen. So I see so much promise in every one of these kids, particularly those that have been truly influenced by trauma in various ways, as younger children and as they've grown. But as my ire gets worse all the time, it's when the system that takes them in makes it worse.
Right.
Instead of helping them, or sends them in this recycle to where they never really get to where they need to be at the end of their time in care, right? They still have the struggles ahead of them.
Well, you're preaching now, Irene. And it's like my day job is I work in the insurance space and try to figure out how we serve people more meaningfully and better. And then on my off time, I'm kind of wrestling with these questions, like, what are we doing as a society? Like, what do we need to do from a public policy and space? So yeah, you are on the money.
Yeah.
I was going to mention too, Irene, anytime you have a quote that's not attributed, just feel free to attribute it to me if it's really a good one.
Okay, I can do that. I've got a few that are really awesome, but nope, I can't figure out who said them. And so, that's kind of a terrible thing. Anyway, I think your point earlier too about why maybe the percentage of boys seem to be lower than girls is because of the acting out piece of how they manage, how they're dealing with things. Not that girls don't act out; they certainly do, but in different ways. I certainly experienced that over the years. But the boys are much more aggressive typically, and they're the ones who kick the sheetrock in on the bedroom door walls, and put their fists through the bedroom doors, and all of those things. Or ran around the house in a fit of rage and cut every screen on every window in our house before we could catch them. Those kind of things, because they had to get the feeling out. And how to manage that is incredibly difficult. And you kind of have to, I hate the term think outside the box, but boy, sometimes you got to think really crazy in order to get their attention, and kind of break that cycle right then, and like do something so stupid or so outrageous that they kind of like, what? What's she doing? But it would stop the behavior.
That's
and
right.
There's things we can do, but we have to learn that. Somebody has to teach us how to try this, it might work, try something stupid, it might work, something outrageous, it might work. Sing them a song, it might work. Turn on the radio real loud, it might work. I mean, you got to try all that stuff because every kid's going to react differently. But we can manage this if we think it through.
I totally, walk outside, bring your phone and say, hey Siri, why is this boy cutting all the screens? Something to break through like that. Something that
absolutely
would stop the moment.
Like, and why am I doing that?
I'm with you. And again, like the thing that is ultimately the breakthrough in all of this, especially for kids who are kind of in the system, right, in foster care. The ultimate kind of breakthrough and hack and whatever you want to call it is when that kid finally feels that they are safe and stable, right? When they experience like, okay, like I've done all my tricks, right? I've done all my things I know how to do to blow things up. You know, I'm still here. All right, now what are we gonna do, right? Like that's, yeah, I'm in a new like headspace, mental space now because again, I've exhausted my list of acting out. I mean, there's no more screens to cut. There's no more whatever, and I'm still here. And so apparently this is a new place, a new thing, a new experience. So yeah.
Right. Absolutely true. And we had this little boy, and he was not quite 3, and he destroyed everything. Anything he could reach was broken, pulled down, destroyed. I mean, and you couldn't touch him. He didn't want you to touch him. He wouldn't let you hold him. And then he would stand and cry and cry and cry and hold his arms up like, hold me, pick him up, and he'd fight you and hit you and push it until you got to put him down and go destroy something. And after he'd break something, he'd say to me, you hit me now? And I'd say, no, I don't hit people. I don't hit children, and I don't hit adults. And then he'd go on and he'd do another thing. You come hit me now? And so I got some sage advice from a therapist, and she said, Irene, if you can just outlast him, he's going to do some whatever outrageous things he can do at his age that he can think of to do. And then he's going to reach a limit because you haven't hit him. She said, you're just going to have to give it some time. So one day he took me by the hand and he took me in the bedroom and he pulled out my underwear drawer, which was the second drawer from the floor, whips out his little penis and just urinates all over my clean underwear. Now this little boy's not 3 yet. And I thought, okay, this has got to be the worst thing he can think of, right? Because breaking lamps, tearing up things, pulling the curtains down, whatever, I did not react. So he's thinking this was my personal stuff here. And so I just looked at him and I said, wow, that's a mess. They're all wet. Let's go get the laundry basket because we're going to have to wash all these. So we went and got the laundry basket and came in and I said, I know it's going to be kind of yucky, but I want you to help me. You help me and then we'll go wash our hands together. He helped pick up those wet clothes and put them in the basket. We went and put them in the washing machine, went and washed our hands. And he looked at me, you not hit me?
He's like,
no,
really?
I'm not going to hit you. I don't hit children. But I would love for you to sit on my lap and let's read a story. Right? Now, did he sit on my lap right away? No. But eventually, yes, he did.
Right.
But, I just had to outlast him. And he had to know I wasn't going to hurt him.
Right.
It was not going to happen. And when you're not even
powerful.
3 and your brain is going there, just think of what our older kids are going through and what their thought process must be. Well, they're going to come up with some real doozies to get you. I mean, have you ever heard Josh Shipp? He was in foster care. Josh, he's a wonderful, wonderful speaker. He's got a book out now, and he's actually been a keynote at a recent National Foster Parent Conference. And he's wonderful. But he says that he was a teenager when he joined his foster, the last of the foster families. And the dad was this big old guy with a big old belly, and very few words. And he said, I already had him pegged, man. I could tease him and go after him, and I'd be out of there in 2 weeks, just like every other place they ever put me. And he says 3 years later, I'm still there. The guy's immovable, and they adopted him. And, Josh says he owes his life to this couple, but particularly to this dad. Who became the immovable object for him, that no matter what, no matter how horrible, no matter what, he wasn't going to go anywhere. I just wish that kind of person for every kid, right?
Oh,
Whether they're
man.
foster care or not,
Absolutely.
every kid's got to have that kind of champion in their life. So anyway, I think we're well past our time, probably, Jeff. Any parting words on this topic before we go?
No, I hope that this is encouraging for people who are listening. Again, I mean, one of the ways I frame this again is, the kids that we're serving, and that especially the folks who are listening or serving, they were broken by relationships, right? In the relationships that they come from, that's where they are broken. And it is like this weird irony of life. It's these new relationships that have the opportunity to provide healing and bring a new healing. And so I want to encourage you all. And, there's a lot of great resources out there around PTSD and other things. But no, just thank you so much for having me, Irene. This was a real honor and such a fun conversation. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. So I do have a little thing to close out. There we go. Found this cartoon. I found a whole bunch of cartoons lately, and they're relevant to COVID. But this one really tickled me because I see it happen every day. Everywhere we go, that somebody's got kids, and they're keeping everything sanitary and clean. And then mama's done such a good job, and then the next thing you know, the kid's licking the handlebar. Right? It's just the story of life. We do our best, we try our hardest, and then guess what? It's going to happen. So I hope that ending today's episode with a chuckle like this will be helpful to all those out there who are struggling, like that mom is, to make sure her family stays safe and healthy. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. And again, thank you, Jeff. We'll see you actually again in a couple of weeks.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with our friends at United Healthcare. For more information about United Healthcare, please visit www.uhc.com.